Welcome to this video where we're going to be covering how to generate a Google Cloud platform function, that is a GCP function, from a Corticon.js set of business rules generated into a decision service directly from Corticon.js Studio. Let's jump in. So just as a quick recap, what we're going to be showing here is the serverless version of Corticon deployment as opposed to the server-based deployment of Corticon, wherein you would be deploying to a Corticon server. With Corticon.js, we're generating a self-contained JavaScript bundle, which for our purposes means that there are no external dependencies outside of what gets generated. It can run wherever JavaScript is able to run, and all of the different aspects of the logic in a similar fashion as it would be generated into a server-based decision service will instead, in this case, be generated into a fully self-contained JavaScript decision service. Effectively, it'll be one file with the JS extension encapsulating all of the different pieces of business logic that we define in our rules. So here's my rule flow that has yet to be generated into the decision service. If you're unfamiliar with Corticon, this is the screen within which we ultimately will generate our decision service from the different aspects of the logic defined herein. So a rule flow is made up of various different rule sheets, and what we're looking at here, as you might have guessed, is going to be a car insurance application set of business rules. So just as a quick example, in that first rule sheet for rating criteria, what we're going to be doing is looking at things like what is and is not legal as far as evaluation criteria of risk for an insurance policy application. So over the course of that rule flow, the data that gets passed in, say just an initial set of application data, insurance application that is, will be evaluated, and ultimately the data will be changed into ultimately the evaluation decision that's been produced as a result of these rules that we've been defining over the course of each of those rule sheets in that rule flow. The rule flow is then generated into the JavaScript bundle, and because JavaScript is quite flexible and can run in any number of environments, Corticon.js makes it pretty straightforward to select what we call a target platform. So all that really means is, in all cases, we're going to have that same JavaScript bundle file encapsulating all the logic, but Corticon.js is going to generate for us whichever wrapper around that JavaScript bundle that we feel that is most applicable to our use case. In this case, we'll see how we can generate these rules into a JavaScript bundle pre-configured for use within GCP. So here's a look at a JSON payload that might contain all of that initial input data necessary for the decision service to be run. As an idea of how this would look within Corticon.js Studio, specifically in a rule test. You can think of this almost similar to a API testing tool that you might use within your development environment, where we can essentially evaluate all of the different ways that the rules are changing the input over the course of the decision service. But in Corticon.js Studio, we're going to be testing, as you'll see, directly within the context of that pre-deployed set of rules, so before we've actually generated the business logic into a JavaScript bundle. But as we just saw there, the ultimate messaging and the structure of the data being evaluated is one and the same, whether it be a rule test in Corticon.js Studio prior to deploying a JavaScript bundle, or the actual payload as it will look and return when we generate this JavaScript bundle and pass in data in live time. So if I go back to my rule flow here, that's where we can generate our decision service. And as I mentioned, we can select the wrapper that's going to be most applicable for our use case. Again, in this case, we'll go with a Google Cloud function, but any number of options are available. And these are just template kind of wrapper code. Again, we can run this JavaScript wherever JavaScript runs. This just makes our lives a little bit easier as we go to generate for a specific environment, because it's going to be as if we custom coded a JavaScript function specific to any number of these platforms, because what we're going to get out of the generation into this directory that we selected will be a pre-configured zip file that is going to be recognizable to whichever platform it is, in this case GCP. So we're going to be able to upload that zip file directly to GCP and run it again as if it were a custom coded and non-business rule driven example of a GCP function. So going back into that file explorer from where I generated that decision service, this is the actual zip file that I will be uploading into the GCP portal. But in all cases, we'll have this wrapper code which will contain the decision service. That decision service bundle.js is all of the logic. That's really the thing that changes from use case to use case. The wrapper code is just template for how we might invoke this particular function depending upon the environment in which we're running this JavaScript function. So if we go into our Google Cloud Function portal here, we're going to navigate to that Cloud Function aspect of the Google Cloud portal. We're going to now go ahead and create a function. So click that button, Create Function. From there, we're going to stick with most of the defaults here. For this demonstration, we're going to do something relatively inadvisable, allow unauthenticated invocations. That'll just allow us to be able to test this from an external testing tool very quickly for demo purposes. Now, with this pre-configured template that GCP provides us, we can see how there's this basic template example of the code which will invoke the function. We're actually going to instead go to that drop-down, select a zip upload, and what that'll allow us to do is just navigate to the specific zip file that we created from Corticon.js Studio. Again, the same file directory. We're going to upload it, and Corticon.js has already pre-configured all of the different aspects of the handler code which will invoke the decision service bundle. Moving on, if we just go ahead and deploy from what we did right there, I'm going to expedite this process. It takes about 30 or so seconds, so I sped this up for our purposes. And what I've done is now I've made available this endpoint as a GCP function. What that means is we can now test it directly within GCP. So if we go back to the rule test here, and if I right click and now export that JSON to clipboard as I had, as I take this input payload and now want to use this for the runtime test, I can now go to the testing pane of the GCP panel, and let's see how this decision service will actually produce the output based upon that same input data. Now, GCP is not going to make my life too easy with that very long line of the response code, so let's instead actually run this within a API testing tool. I'm going to be using an online tool which will allow me to replicate the same sort of thing you might within Postman or SOAP UI. It's called Hopscotch. So here, what I've done is I've covered up the URL, but this is where we can take that same URL from the unauthenticated configuration. That's the reason that we left that as unauthenticated, just to see how it would interact with the outside world here. So when I go ahead and run this by pasting that same code that I had or the same JSON payload that I had exported from Corticon.js, now I'm going to be able to expand out and see all of the different aspects of the rules that have changed over the course of that decision service having been evaluated. So this is a very flexible way that we can deploy Corticon.js decision service bundles wherever and however is most applicable to our given architecture that we're targeting. Also bear in mind that while I have really only focused on the data being changed, so the data related to this particular application, specifically the decision that's been made about that input data, there's various ways that we can configure how this decision service is being executed by, say, including in this response payload the rule trace data, meaning all of the different steps over the course of the decision service that were taken from changing that input payload to what it looks like at that output, which rule impacted which aspect of the change data, ultimately leading to this decision upon this car insurance application. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and please feel free to reach out to us with any questions, but look forward to hearing and seeing all of the cool stuff that people are able to build with GCP and Corticon.js.